Good morning class, welcome to my lecture. In this lecture we are going to talk about the anatomy of long bone. And as we know, femur bone, which is also called thigh bone, is one of the strongest and the longest bone in our body. And today in this lecture we are going to talk about all the structures and the different parts of this bone. Okay, so we have to start from the major things that we need to understand about the bone. These types of bone has two parts. Okay, the two major parts of this bone is, first is epiphysis and another is diaphysis. Okay, so which one is epiphysis and what is diaphysis? Okay, so if you see the bone clearly, the diagram of the bone clearly, you can see that the end area, the end portion of this bone is expanded, is broadened, is expanded, right? So this area is called epiphysis. This broadened area is known as epiphysis. In this lower end also there is a broadened area which is also called epiphysis. Okay, and below the epiphysis there is a hard compact bone which is called diaphysis. This area is called diaphysis. It's called diaphysis. If you talk about epiphysis, this area, this broadened area, epiphysis, is made up of spongy bone. Spongy bones. And what you know about spongy bone? Spongy bone means these bones are soft bones. These bones are arranged like a honeycomb structure, and there are number of pores in the spongy bones. If you talk about diaphysis bone are made up of compact bone. Compact bone. Remember, spongy bone is present in the epiphysis region, where the diaphysis region is completely made up of compact bone, which is dense bone, right? Which makes the diaphysis region tough. Okay, if you talk about several other types of this epiphysis region, then we have to understand that this epiphysis region has two other types. That is, this tip region of epiphysis is called proximal epiphysis. Proximal epiphysis. And below the proximal epiphysis there is a region or place or area, we can say that is meta-epiphysis. Meta-epiphysis. Okay, so we have to understand that in this meta-epiphysis there is epiphyseal plate. In another word, we can say that this is also known as growth plate. This growth plate or epiphyseal plate is responsible for the elongation of the bone. From this metaphysis region, the length of the bone actually increases, and which helps in our growth of the body. Okay, and then after, if you talk about the lower epiphysis, this end, the lower end of epiphysis is called distal end. Distal end, or we can also say that it is distal epiphysis. Okay, and above the distal epiphysis there is another meta-epiphysis. Meta-epiphysis. Okay, so these are the basic structures we have to understand. Now what? Now we have to understand, inside this epiphysis, the broad area, the broad region, the matter inside is red bone marrow. Red bone marrow. Red bone marrow are responsible for the production of blood cells like RBC, erythrocytes, leukocytes and platelets. So red bone marrow is responsible for the production of blood cells. Okay, and if we go further for the diaphysis is made up of compact bone, and the outer layer of diaphysis is called periosteum. And the periosteum is the outer layer of diaphysis, which is completely made up of compact bone, and which makes the bone harder and tough. Okay, all the blood vessels and nerves are passes through this periosteum into the bone. Okay, so nerves and blood vessels are passed through the periosteum, which is the outer layer, outer covering of the bone. Okay, inside the diaphysis there is a cavity, there is a hollow cavity which is called medullary cavity. And the most important things, this medullary cavity is completely filled with yellow bone marrow. Medullary cavity consists yellow bone marrow, and yellow bone marrow is responsible for the storage of fat, where red bone marrow is responsible for the productions of blood cells like RBC, WBC and platelets. Okay, at the emergency time, whenever the blood cells are required in our body, yellow bone marrow can change into red bone marrow to produce blood cells. Okay, now we have to understand what this is: the medullary cavity, and the inner lining of the medullary cavity is called endosteum. The outer layer of this diaphysis is called periosteum. Blood vessels and nerves are passed through periosteums, and endosteum is the inner layer of the medullary cavity, and the whole diaphysis is made up of compact bone which is tensed and hard and tough, where the epiphysis regions are made up of spongy bone which are arranged like a honeycomb structures, and there are number of pores inside it, and it consists red bone marrow which are responsible for blood production, where the medullary cavity inside the bone marrow is the medullary cavity inside this diaphysis region is filled with bone marrow which is yellow bone marrow, which are responsible for the productions of yellow bone marrow, which consists yellow bone marrow. So these are the basic and important structures of the bone. So when a child born, almost all the bone marrow present in their body are red bone marrow. Remember, when a newly born child, all the bone marrow present inside the bone is especially red bone marrow. But when the child grow, at that conditions, some red bone marrow can change into yellow bone marrow inside the medullary cavity of diaphysis. Okay, but after 20 years, when the child becomes of 20 years, what happened there? Almost all the red bone marrow present in our body can change into yellow bone marrow, but some parts inside some parts like ribs, sternum, pelvic, some parts of skulls, vertebrae, inside these all things there is also some amount of red bone marrow. But at the condition of emergency, yellow bone marrow can change into red bone marrow again to form blood cells. So these are the structures and different components, different parts of the bone. That's all for today. See you in next video.